Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Man Watch Required, the podcast that attempts to shed some light on the inspection industry. Our mission is not only to educate, but also to entertain you at the same time. Today's episode, we're going to be continuing on with our turnaround life cycle, if you want to think about it that way. Last episode, we left off, we kind of started with decon piping, some on-site fabrication, bit of requirements there. Getting to know your scope and the importance of that, and also getting to know the people involved, specifically the tradespeople and their supervisors. They're the ones doing the work. Some odd jobs that come up, typical equipment delays, or maybe not typical, but just some unique kind of situations that you more often than not run into there. Talked a little bit about NDE companies and some of the unique certifications they should have and maybe their manpower needs. And then today's episode, we're just going to take off from there, be more into our execution window of the turnaround, if you will. And stay tuned and hope you enjoy. Frank the Tank, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you, Scott? Good intro.
Good. Feels like I just seen you a minute ago. How about that?
So if you're catching this episode, we are actually still here with Ryan. We decided just to keep on going because we really liked the flow of that last episode. We felt like we had a lot of laughs. Hopefully you did too.
Yeah, and we just liked Ryan that much. We want to drag him into another one.
Oh, shucks, guys. Thanks.
Scott, you mentioned in the intro there we're going to do some recap about maybe some decon and on-site fab. Where were you thinking with that? Just things that check or?
Yeah, I think without getting too deep into it, the way to treat that decon piping is like it's real piping, right? You should follow construction code. If your site has a legit, standard procedure in place, you should follow that. That's the ideal situation. Without going too much farther into it, maybe I'll share a story about decon piping. Stories are always fun.
For sure.
This is one of the facilities I work at, somewhat routinely, and they're the ones that have, I would say, the gold standard on decon piping. I really always enjoy it because they do a really good job of it. They treat it like any other type of piping. So one turnaround in particular, the repair contractor kind of had a weaker QC, not the group, but the couple individuals working with the decon that were in earlier, and they didn't have a good grip on like their ND lot sizes, specifically the RT. So they ended up, this unit, this section of the plant, we kind of deconned some of it in phases. So we would use some of the decon piping. They would still be prefabbing some more, and then some of it would get pulled out and then the other stuff would get put in. And that was kind of just how the process worked. And they got so mixed up with the RT percentages that they ended up shooting X-ray percentages on the piping after it got pulled out, after it was already used. And better yet, some of these were repairs. So now now they're repairing it after it's been used, rehydrotesting it, shooting tracers, chasing around more repairs. Didn't get too out of hand that way, but there was a couple repairs they had to repair, rehydrotest after it was already been used. But now this is the place that thoroughly cleans their decon piping, oils it and stores it indoors and tags it appropriately. So it will get used over and over again, but that's how extreme one place really takes their decon piping. It's kind of funny to think of it that, it's already served its purpose. Why are you repairing it and hydrotesting it again now? But, it's for next time, I suppose. But that's an extreme end, I'll say, with the decon piping. And maybe the way it should be done, but that's not how everybody does it, obviously.
Yeah. Everyone forgets that, you can still get the same accident, whether it's decon or the normal process piping. So why wouldn't you treat it any differently?
Exactly. That's my opinion on it, too.
Yeah, you definitely don't want to get bit in the future. And a lot of times people who may have been involved in that project have either moved on or moved into a different position, and you might not have that knowledge there. And especially if there is a repair, if that decon piping sees an exceedance in what it was designed for, or even there could be some potential hazards, I guess, to say the least.
Yeah.
I don't know how else to put that.
Well, and just your traceability there, like if something happens, say somebody gets hurt or injured from a failure, and then you find out that there's all this mess of NDE that wasn't done and some code violations type of thing, somebody could be in a lot of trouble there. That's a pretty extreme, pretty unlikely scenario, but it could happen.
Yeah. Cool. We also touched on getting to know your scope and getting to know your tradespeople. Obviously, you want to know what you're inspecting and what you're inspecting for. Any other previous damage that you might encounter that may have progressed since the last inspection. Maybe some other odd jobs that we talked about, even which did include decom piping, but maybe some decom piping that may include PSVs or what else did we talk about? Do you guys remember?
Yeah, I think that we had some structural examples like having to replace some supports or beefing them up type of thing. That's the structural world gets very disrespected, I guess, unless you're one of those structural people. But from like the pressure equipment integrity, that's one of those things that kind of gets, the side shuffle, if you will, to some degree.
Yeah. There's nothing internal about it. We don't care. We also touched a little bit on NDE companies, certifications, and also the manpower. One thing that we actually kind of wanted to, I might be jumping the list here, but we can actually lead into is, hold on, actually I'm not.
You're jumping halfway down the list. What are you doing?
What was the intent of that one? So we do have NDE company. You want to make sure obviously your people are certified.
And those specific ones, like Ryan spoke to HTHA, those type of things, that's not someone you want to pull off the street. That should be someone you're familiar with. And you may even have some in-house testing you want them to go through type of thing, or some third-party testing. Those are some things you want to look at. And I think with the manpower, like we mentioned, if they need 50 mag techs because of the workload, give them 50 or 40 at least. Don't give them 10, Try to work with them when you can.
There's a lot of a link into turnaround planning for that too. Sometimes you can't get the 50 techs, or you can't just get the guy you want because he's busy on another site or something like that, right? And money pays in that regard.
Yeah, exactly. And that was kind of what the turnarounds overlapping or being at the same time type of thing. Sometimes you can't get the smoking gun that you want, or even just the numbers, right?
Yep.
Are we ready to jump into it?
I think so. If we're following the whiteboard, we're there.
Give her.
We're almost getting pro at this. That was under 10 minutes of a recap.
Well, what was our first recap? Like 45 minutes?
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
Oh, man, we're out of time.
Thanks for joining us.
Oh, that was good.
So as we're getting into turnarounds, there's obviously going to be repairs because this is the time to repair stuff. We mentioned in previous episodes, we are kind of beholden to a regulator, I guess.
Nicely put.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's valid. I mean, the way I look at it is, as an employee of Shell or whoever, you are working for that company, but you are also working for the jurisdiction because really you are the arm of them. You are looking. It's so they don't have to be there doing your job for you, realistically. So, you always got to remember that you are you're beholden to a higher power is really what it is. You get paid by one company, but you really are the arm of ABSA or BCSA or whoever else.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. I think I mentioned that in one of our episodes about the on-site fab contractors, and this could allude to backing up a little bit on our recap. We kind of brushed over the on-site fab, but that's one of those things you want to be aware of what those companies are doing. You want to make sure they're following their quality manual because when they get audited, it's by their shop and then everything's controlled by the shop. Well, how often do you see their shop manager out there seeing what the field's doing? That doesn't happen. So we're a bit of an extension as owner inspectors, let's say, we're a bit of an extension of ABSA to verify that those companies are following their manual. So yeah, that's a great way of putting it.
That's a great way of putting it and a great way of explaining it.
Thank you. Nice assist.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
Nicely done.
So, as we touched on before, kind of in the piping, we don't want to get too deep into the weeds of pressure vessel repair because just before trying to put the second episode together, that is one or two, at least 3 episodes all in itself, right?
Very deep.
So based on your CAP or your certificate of authorization for that company, if they hold one, you will have parameters on what you can and cannot repair without letting the jurisdiction know or notifying the jurisdiction. And actually, you have to notify the jurisdiction anyway. Just a quick phone call saying, "Hey, we're going to do some repairs on a vessel." They're going to what I would imagine in my head is they'll either verify that it's under your cap and say have at her, or they'll check and say, hey, you can't do that. You need us to come out and certify that repair, right?
Yeah, if you weren't going to go there, I was going to jump in and make sure it's so the cap allows you to repair certain things and certify it yourself. You always have to notify them. And what I like to do for the notification, I find works well, is I usually do it in a spreadsheet for them. Now, this is for known repairs, and we're talking around turnarounds here. If you're on the run maintenance, that's more of a one-off, one at a time situation. But for your turnaround, say you have like 20 pieces of equipment or 10 pieces of equipment with several repairs, whatever you got going on, but it's for your known repairs. So what I like to do is make a spreadsheet of quick description, the A number. So that's a registration number that our jurisdiction uses to track your equipment. And then CRN's helpful, and, a serial number, whatever other info you can give them, quick description of what you're doing. And then I'll usually lay out if it's intended to be an owner user certified, or something we can handle, or if it's an ABSA certified repair. Because there are a lot of cases you'll have that. So you're doing a significant alteration or something, they need to be there. So they need to know about that for sure. So I'll kind of break that down. I'll send it to them. And then if they'll usually reply, say, okay, let me know, give me this kind of notice type of thing. Or if you got something weird on there saying you're doing a Div 2 repair and you've got owner user certified, they're going to say, yeah, I don't think so. So you might want to revamp your planning on that one. So that's kind of the back and forth that I like to have with them. And I find that system works well. And then as you get in your turnaround and find new repairs, that can be more of the one at a time type of situation. Like, oh, by the way, we're going to do some build up on this shell. And you probably won't get a lot of feedback because that's something you're certifying in-house. Turns into a flush patch or something. Now maybe you have to bring them in.
Yeah. No, perfectly. What do you think, Ryan?
I agree. Yeah, I didn't have anything to add because he's dead on. But different jurisdictions and different agreements can flex that a little bit. But regardless, whatever repair you're doing always has some sort of either acknowledgement or review from your jurisdiction.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and even some of the really extensive repairs can even go to our ABSA has a design survey group where it's kind of like the cage of 510 inspectors that get plucked out for their inspection. It's something like that. It's like a cage of engineers that they throw in a design or a repair and they all grab it and pick it apart and send it back to you and charge you a little fee for it. So repairs can even go to that extent too if they're extreme enough.
Yep.
You actually said something that I wanted to touch on. I don't know how much I want to go into it, but Div 2 vessels, right? It opens up another kind of little can of worms, but I know
it does.
You know what I noticed about re-listening? I say essentially a lot, right? So I'm going to try and get away from that.
Essentially, you're correct.
Yeah. You have to let the regulator know about any repairs or anything to Div 2 vessels. Like the way to look at it, the way kind of we jokingly look at this is that ABSA actually owns all the Div 2 vessels because they want to know what's happening repair-wise. And I've been on sites where even doing grit blasting, they wanted specific parameters around that because just previous issues with the company we were working with. They wanted UT thickness measurements before and after we did glass bead blasting on this vessel to remove the deposit so we could do some weld repairs or something on it, right?
Yeah,
Scott was actually there.
Thanks for bringing me into that. But yeah, that's a bit of an extreme case. Like that, I think goes to speak to a little bit of a bad relationship with your regulator because that's not a typical thing they'll want. But yes, anytime you're doing a repair to a Div 2, you can think of it as they own it. They sure didn't chip in the manufacturing stages, no doubt there, but they do kind of own the control of it as far as any kind of repair or alterations you want to do to it. Like your manufacturers and repair companies will have, a lot of them will have Div 2 listed on their cap, so they can do the work, no problem. I don't know of too many owner users that have that on their cap and can go ahead and certify that themselves. So that's kind of two different avenues you want to be careful of. Just because your repair contractor can do the repairs, that doesn't mean you can certify it.
Yeah.
As the owner inspector.
Yeah, no, very good point. I like how I just kind of throw little hand grenades there and then Scott comes and smooths it out afterwards, right? This is what he actually means.
Well, I mean, I'm learning things too. I mean, my experience with Div 2 vessels isn't as much as it should be. Usually what I've seen is a lot of companies trying to, if you can, get away from it just because the extracurricular stuff you have to do with repairs and with cycle counting is just a lot of work. So you got to be very sure when you do that.
I would say depending on the facility you're at and actually what the facility's trying to do, like you might not ever see a Div 2 vessel, right? But
Exactly.
if you're in, certain units, I don't know if I should say which units,
I know, but I mean, there's certain processes you cannot get away from
Yeah,
each vessel,
yeah.
so you're locked into it.
Right.
I've been, not blessed enough to not see enough of that, so I can't really speak
Well,
on it.
I've actually even been at facilities where they've bought and used Div 2 vessels, but they weren't required to be Div 2 for the operation
Right.
of that process, right? But they
they're
didn't
still anyway.
they didn't derate them or anything, because if once you derate a piece of equipment, you got to do all the math and paperwork and
Yeah, it's
pay
harder
the
to go
fees
back.
to go
Exactly.
back up, right? So they just left them as Div 2 vessels and treated them as such, right? And that was quite a bit of learning experience, because we did have
Absolutely.
repairs on it, and I was like, oh, it's like the first kind of time that we need to get in touch with the regulator and let them know what the heck we're doing.
Yeah.
So, and yes, the glass bead blasting example I gave was an extreme example, but it's kind of shows the highlights of it. And Scott's right. Most of the time, you're going to have a pretty good relationship with your regulator and say, hey, we're going to go in there. This is our intent. We suspect some repairs. We'll let you know what we actually find it and when we start. Before we start
Yep.
to
Yeah.
execute it.
Well, you're right. It's a relationship, and
Yeah.
they need to trust that you know what you're doing and you have the history of it. And if you do, then it's usually not a problem. They'll let you run most of it, and it's more of an upkeep and a hey, we're done, and it's all back to normal kind of thing.
Yeah, it's definitely a kind of a credit rating type of system. If you have no credit, they're not going to trust you very well. If you have bad credit, they're really not going to, give you any kind of leash at all. And if you do a good job and have a good history, they're going to trust you a lot more. There's 3 plants in Alberta. Well, one's kind of in Saskatchewan, I suppose, but they all have the same unit, so they all have the same twin train setup of Div 2 vessels. And I work in all 3 of them fairly routinely. So it's essentially the same plant, just in different cities, but very different. One's a different regulator altogether, I should say, but still just the relationship they have and what they can get away with and what they can't. Like Frank alluded to earlier, the grid blasting, a bit of an extreme scenario. That's one of these facilities. And then another one I've been at, we've went ahead and done, some pretty minor shell repairs with the notification, everything in place, without even our regulator there being present, just kind of doing all the certification over email and back and forth that way. So there's a bit of a stretch there depending on your relationship for sure and your credit rating, I suppose.
Yeah, and the first Div 2 vessel I worked on, we actually just excavated repairs and left the excavations
Absolutely.
as was, right? Because
Yep.
they were over-engineered as it was, and they kind of figured out, you can
Yep.
take a bit of material out to clear that indication.
That's a common
Yeah.
fix on a lot of vessels, actually. 'Cause, I mean,
Yeah.
welding is not always the best way to go at it, and if you don't actually have a lot of integrity problems, or maybe it's just an infant mortality thing, there's no need to add it back.
Yeah, and that's actually a good lead-in or segue, Scott, into the next kind of point on our board is knowing your team ins and stuff like that before. And this kind of falls back to getting to know your scopes and stuff. You're not going to really need to know your team in before you do the vessel inspection, but it's going to be something you want to be aware of while you're reviewing the NDE reports or any thickness readings or stuff that you may have taken yourself and writing your report, because that's going to move into something that will further down the list is reporting and stuff like that. But
No, I mean it's absolutely valid. There's conditions I've gone in with. You'd have a Manel clad on an overhead and an atmospheric atmospheric column, I should say. And you go in, you find very specific and aggressive pitting, and you look in, and it was like 50 to 80 thou. It was quite deep, but you don't think about it. It's like, oh well, it's probably fine. You move off and you go do your thing, and then get to the end of the day and you start to review that, and you do the calculation of nominal with the loss and realize you're right at team in, and it's like if you didn't have that in events, you'd be lagging with that reporting to get it back into turnaround to fix it.
yeah, and that's something that from a contractor's inspection point of view, I'm looking at it and I'm just going to think like the engineering department of that company or whoever is helping direct you with this work, they should know that team in and provide it to you, so you kind of have that reference point. And normally they will, and so you can kind of make that call and incorporate these kind of readings and remaining life and corrosion rate in your inspection report. I kind of feel like I got lost in that explanation somewhere else. So I kind of feel like I did jump ahead, but
You want me to clean that up for you?
yeah. Please segue into that. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you say contractor, we what we mean is by contractor, the guy coming in for execution. That can be a staff person too. So you can be a contract guy early on in the planning. You might be aware of these things. So that's kind of what we're alluding to by that. The places that do a good job of this, they'll have the team in calculations in their IMS program or whatever they're running right in there. So you have that information available. And it's where it comes in handy too is when you get into the repair phase of things, because that can make a significant difference too once you're encroaching on that. So it is info you want to have. If you're at the facility where they don't provide you the history and you don't know what they're going to do about it, you're just there to take pictures type of thing. Maybe it's not as relevant because you're just not given it and there's nothing you can do with it. But the places that do a good job of it and they do have that calculated for you, that's great information to have in the repair space and in the, when you're doing your UT readings and that and calculating your next inspection date, that type of thing.
It really helps with your urgency of, is this a big problem or is this not?
Yeah.
Which is really key when you're in the heat of it, right?
Yeah, and actually, you said something there that a lot of times, if you show up as a contract inspector for execution, depending on the setup of the company, like I've been to places where you write all your reports and you basically kind of like we said in the last episode, a cold inspection where you don't have much and you're just going in. You have your own laptop, obviously, and you're doing your notes and you essentially hand your report over in either PDF form with photos on the side or a Word document with photos embedded into it. Those company inspectors or unit inspectors will take your report, take what they think is the pertinent information and upload it into their IMS system. Whereas some of the larger companies, you'll show up and there's computers with limited access to their integrity management programs where you can input your inspection notes directly into their system. And then it gets electronically reviewed and approved through kind of like a chain of command of, senior inspectors for that unit.
Your unit inspector is the one who's actually going to stand by it.
Mm-hmm.
So you bring people in. That's really the philosophy is, the contractor's coming in to function as the unit inspector because there's too much stuff for him to do it all. So it's usually let everyone sort of do what they need to, and then the unit looks at it, validates it, stands by the issues that are brought up, and establishes how to manage it moving forward.
Yeah, so, like in the example where you're not given the info, you're essentially just a GoPro for the unit inspector is all you really are, right? And I mean, that's, I guess, okay for some people, but it's not the most satisfying thing to do.
Well, it's short-sighted fundamentally, in my personal opinion. Because
I would agree, yeah.
I can't go in and look at it. I need you to be my eyes, and that's the key to it, is that these people that get hired on are hired on because they're capable and they're smart and they can function in that role. And that's really the hardest thing, is coming in cold and all of a sudden being able to function as a unit inspector, which is what you're sort of trying to do. And that's why it makes so much sense to give you as much chance to succeed, because it really, if you fail, it's me that's failing, not you guys.
Mm-hmm. I think it also just is a good point to have people who are listening to this, because I would assume there's maybe some seasoned guys listening to this, but maybe we're kind of gearing this towards the newer inspectors, trying to help them kind of experience, like get what, already. We're kind of just trying to help them kind of get a feel of things that they should be cognizant of and should be kind of thinking about while they're in the field.
What to look out for, that type of thing.
Yeah. So
everyone has a mentor coming up through this, and it's starting to become such a niche trade, really, that the good mentorship is starting to get harder to come by, and really anything that does anything industrial is going to benefit from knowledge sharing. Mm-hmm. And that's really what I think is key about this.
Yeah, and that's kind of like one of our driving factors for even doing this, right? There's a lot of good information out there that a lot of people have, but it seems to be secretive for some reason. I mean, you can access codes and standards and regulations and decipher things that way, but it's the hands-on experience. It's the knowledge that, you know, your guys that have been around the block a few times have. And, you know, why not share that with everybody?
Yeah, well, at least give it a platform where it can kind of grow and kind of have conversation, because it's fun, realistically.
Be the force for good in the world.
Yeah. You got to do something, else you're doing nothing, right?
Yeah.
So, kind of moving on with this, we kind of talked about, just in the kind of setup for this, is sometimes if it's a big enough facility, you'll have multiple units in turnaround, and some units might have different inspection companies. They may have different NDE companies who kind of do things a little bit differently, and we kind of have faced things in the past where you'll get a totally different looking report, which may be hard to decipher, or may have missing information that you're used to seeing. That's actually probably the biggest one, right?
Yeah, that would be the most relevant for sure. I mean, their template and everything could be laid out differently. And there's not a lot you can say to that, but you want to make sure that relevant information, whatever it is that you're looking for, is on there, regardless of the company and the template. And it's really, you owe it to them to have those conversations in your pre, and everybody understands what's going on there. Because if that expectation is not laid out, it's not fair to start rejecting these things. And then it slows it down too, right? You want that information quickly. You want to know if it's good to close up, if you need to action some repairs, something like that, right? But you really want to streamline that is the main thing.
Yeah, and actually, they might be another person to go stop off at and have a quick chat during your walk-arounds, right? When you're meeting all the crews and everybody.
Yeah, we kind of left them out too, didn't we?
Yeah, we did. There's just so many people that you need to interface with.
Yeah, and that's kind of the message, getting to know everybody. Like, your people involved in the planning, like the long drawn out planning, they're going to know all these people, right? For sure. And then your kind of lead inspectors should know them too. But yeah, you should get to know them as well too. Like, they probably have a coordinator you want to get in touch with. You know, you need a mag technician to come do some work for you, that type of thing. And you want to get to know the techs too, right? Know the troublemakers, know the good ones, and, you know who's going to do good work for you, who does good reports, who does bad reports. I mean, there's a lot of both out there. So it's same thing like we talked about with the foreman and the GFs of the mechanical contractors. Same idea, right?
Yeah. Well, and, you know, fundamentally, it's just this whole business seems to be a balance of unknowns, probabilities. Mm-hmm. So, you know, the more you can understand the quality of your what's that? Hello. The more you can assess the quality of the data coming in, the more you can have confidence in it and really believe that you've adequately sized the defect.
Yeah. Just for the record, that was a can of fresh air, just like on Spaceballs, right?
Exactly. Yeah. What else would it be?
Something that kind of actually goes back to planning that popped into my head is you might want, if you have CMLs or locations that we need to do NDE on that typically might be too hot or may have limited access, you want to give the NDE technician within that package, give them some team ins or even nominals so they know what their kind of ranges they're looking for. Because I've reviewed reports where the technician just arbitrarily set their own kind of thicknesses to report with, and it set off a chain of reactions. Like, and then actually I had a moment of clarity, and I was like, why don't I just go talk to the guy and ask him what he did? Yeah, exactly. And you know, luckily it was a phased array UT report, and they had, I think, over 600,000 different data points on it.
Millions and millions.
Right. So we could actually look at a lot of the data and kind of
adjust it if you need
adjust it accordingly.
Adjust the calibration of what you're looking at.
Adjust the range of what we were looking at anyway. Like, it wasn't like any information was altered or anything. We just kind of organized it in a way that made more sense for what it was intended for, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's no different than us doing like internal inspections and things like that, wanting that past history and wanting to know what to expect, you know, known repairs, those type of things, right? It's the same idea for those NDE companies. And if you don't give them that information, you can't expect, you know, the best finished product either. They can only work with what they have.
I would actually even say it's more sensitive for an NDE company, because what you're playing with is bouncing sound off things, and you don't always know what's happening with that. No, I'm serious. The technology is so sensitive in so many cases that if you front load that technician with the information he needs, he's going to come back with infinitely better data.
No doubt. Yeah.
It is in your own best interest to feed everyone as much information as you can, because they're going to come out with more of what you need.
Yeah, and that actually might give them more confidence in the own data that they've collected. Because if you tell them there might be deep scattered pits anywhere, and if they get a one-off reading where it's low, instead of interpreting that differently as maybe probe lift or rock or maybe a lamination, they might say, hey, there might be some pitting here that you need to go check out. Yeah.
Right. It's funny. The key ingredient seems to be like the line of communication and the transferring information back and forth, but ultimately that is always the thing that gets broken and causes the biggest frustrations and the biggest missteps, if you will, right? So it's kind of funny way to look at it, is we keep preaching that you got to have this line of communication, you got to share your information, but then ultimately that is what gets broken, and that's what comes back to bite you.
Yeah, this old, well, at the time he was older than me, so I'll say he's old, but this old inspector.
Wait, did he get younger than you?
No, that'd be freaky, right?
Wouldn't it?
Benjamin Button or something?
Yeah. An older inspector that I came across in a refinery out east, actually, somewhere in Ontario. He gave me some really good advice, and he said, you need to tell people what you're expecting in order to get what you expect back from them, right? And as simple as that was, it kind of revolutionized my kind of inspection, the methods in which I convey scope, right? I kind of go a little overboard in kind of, I don't say directing, but just kind of giving a picture to the crew that of how I expect this to be repaired, or even what documents I'm expecting and what methods or series of events I expect to happen during this repair, right? So I know what's going on, and I know the right times to go in and check on exactly what's happening, and also to give them the freedom and room to do what they need to do, because usually they know what they're doing, and if you trust that crew, they're going to get the job done and inform you if there's any issues, kind of like what we talked about last episode.
Yeah, it's simple but effective. You put shit info in, you get shit info back. It's easy as that.
Exactly it. That's life also, I should say.
You can apply that anywhere.
I like this because Scott is swearing, and actually during some of the reviews of people that know us, they were like, how are you getting Scott to swear? He's usually like super quiet in the offices, right?
You bring out the best in me, Frank.
I'm surprised I'm not swearing more. My original job, they called it Ryan's Sweary Training, because I'm trying to teach everyone Meridium, and it's just cuss words left, right, and center.
Yeah, just to be safe, I always throw the explicit rating on the episodes just in case, even though most of the time it's nothing very bad. But
I think it's that red record light. It kind of deters you from what you're saying.
Yeah, you never know, right?
Mom could be listening.
Something else we kind of wanted to touch on was actually performing your inspection, reporting, and cleaning expectations. I think actually maybe we should move cleaning to the front of that.
Yeah, I think that was an afterthought, and I almost wrote it on the line above there. But maybe we'll jump into that first and then just kind of progress through that more naturally.
Yeah, so we've been talking a lot about, I'm going to say air quotes here, decon, right, and decontaminating the unit prior to inspection. And as dangerous, I guess, as our job is going into confined spaces, and sometimes confined spaces within confined spaces, just to kind of lay eyes on some metal and kind of report the condition of it, I have to give credit to people who go in before us when it could be a slip and slide of just oil and grease. That is the dirtiest
job you could get to.
Yeah.
That should be on dirty jobs, honestly.
Yeah, it should.
Oh, yeah. I'm thinking about the guys vacuuming out the catalyst in the spacesuit. Oh, yeah. My. I couldn't. I don't think I could ever do that job. Like, that's really something that there's people out there that do that.
Cleaning a desalter?
Yeah.
Good night nurse, man. That's not good.
Yeah, there is some people who actually take some pretty heavy risks going into equipment before us to clean it so we can go in and actually assess it. Again, I'm not that old, but I also remember being old enough to be walking by vessels and peering through a manway, and there's a guy in a rain jacket inside of a vessel with a
The big wand,
3,000 to 10,000
got him
psi
pinned
pressure
against
wand.
the wall.
Yeah, right. And that kind of stuff's not done anymore. Where we're at the point now, technology's kind of progressed where we have automated 3-dimensional
3D
cleaning
washing and stuff.
Yeah. And it does a fairly good job,
Absolutely.
right? And we try and limit the exposure on that before. But I remember looking down in like a mud drum one time, and there was a dude waist deep in water just spraying scale
We had
off the wall.
my previous facility, we had a big tall column that you'd open the bottom head out, and so they'd change all the catalyst in it. And you'd have a guy with a raincoat and a face shield with the wand, and he's spraying upwards, and it's just all coming down on him. And it's like phosphoric acid based stuff,
Yeah.
and it's like, why? You better hope they neutralized that before they got the guy in there. But he's just like, there's nowhere to go. He's just wearing everything he's putting back up, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, it's
next
really
level.
it's crazy. Yeah, like we think we have a risky job, and we do sometimes. But man, that's to some of the automated stuff they do now. That think that there was people in those situations. Sometimes there still is a little bit, but yeah, it's wow. I couldn't imagine.
The invention of the 3D head has changed all of that. I don't know if you're familiar with the 3D head.
Yeah.
But it's basically two nozzles offset by a little bit, and you put 40,000 pounds per square inch, and she just spins like a thunderball, and it just cleans everything. So it's changed. But it also blows out all the tray caps too, which is great.
Yeah.
But count the tray caps at the bottom of the bottom of the column. But
Yeah.
at least you don't have to put anyone in harm's way anymore.
Either that or you're collecting them in a witch's hat upstream on your pump, right?
Exactly right. Exactly right.
If you're doing a retray or something, it's just helping you out, anyways.
You
It's
just
really messing with that
shove
coat.
them down the drain.
Yeah, exactly.
That's what it's for, right? It's like a garbage disposal.
Anyway, I
So
feel like we went off topic. here.
no, we're still talking about
All right,
cleaning, right?
all right.
Just
Yeah,
a little
fair enough,
sideways,
fair
not too bad.
Maybe one thing too is in trade columns and vessels, the Boilermaker's got to go in there and remove the tray manways, right?
Yeah.
And even that is a pain in the ass job because it's usually small hardware in there, and you got bulky gloves. And
It is. I got a funny story about that. We were waiting outside this one tower for the Boilermakers to go in, and the assembly of this one had actually 4 manways at each tray level, so like in quadrants, that type of style. So 4. No, sorry, is that how it? No. I think what it was is they each went in a manway, so 4 levels. Yeah, I think that was how it was. Sorry, one manway at each level, internal manway. So there was 4 manways. Vessel was essentially split up into 4 pretty equal sections as far as tray levels. So 4 Boilermakers went in. There was like a super seasoned guy, he's typically like a GF, that type of thing, been doing this his whole life. A couple like middle of the pack guys, and then like a super new guy, probably even a welder or something, so he doesn't really do a whole lot of this. And it was almost like a race. I think it was about 15 minutes, and the old seasoned guy was done, out, sitting in the truck with us waiting. About a half an hour later, the other 2 guys, roughly about the same time, and it was about 2 hours before the relatively new guy came out. So it was kind of funny, but they're all doing the same job, right? Just busting off those 4. And the new guy, I think, was taking him so long as he was trying to protect all the hardware, so he's being very careful with it, where the old seasoned guy was just snapping off all the bolts, throwing the manway out of the way, jumping down to the next one because he knows it's all being replaced.
Yeah, you don't need to save it all.
Exactly, yeah.
you don't need a wrench, right? Just a crowbar, just ripping them out.
Yeah, really. The wrench is their crowbar just to bust it off is all it is.
They ordered new ones, new hardware. Don't worry.
Yeah, little tricks of the trade, I suppose.
One thing I don't think we're gonna have exactly enough time to, but just performing the inspections and reporting on them. Just to touch base on that quickly, I usually, and I think Scott and Ryan have the same kind of methodology. We start at one end of the vessel, or either the top or the bottom, and work to the other end and report accordingly, right? If you have a drawing with shell courses, note which shell courses you have corrosion on, right? And even clock orientation, and if you even want to go the extra level, depending on what type of vessel you're in, you can measure from course to course weld, right? And go from there and kind of, quote, map it out. So maybe in the future they can do on-stream external scans to check for corrosion progression, stuff like that.
Tidelines are a big thing for me. Checking
Tidelines,
for a tide line, because that tells you if you got any acids in there, if they're sitting in maybe the vapor phase, or if they're in the liquid phase, or even if you have a rag layer. I remember one situation I had it was a sulfuric acid secondary knockout drum, and for whatever reason they couldn't get the level down low enough, but the bottom was basically clean, and then they had a step right in the middle where it was almost through T-min, and it was about, I don't know, maybe half an inch wide. And now what it was some sort of material that was basically sitting on the top of the liquid at the bottom that was incredibly corrosive, and then the bottom wasn't at all.
Yeah, wow, that's interesting.
That might actually touch into maybe your dirty inspection or your opening inspection, especially for Tidelines, like Tidelines, or I guess the proper way to say it would be your internal liquid level.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, so really what it shows up as a difference in your corrosion pattern. Mm-hmm. So it could be even as like if you look at Fitness for Service, they got a bunch of charts about what kind of pitting looks like. You might see a change in that, even though it might not see like you might not see wall loss, but the visual of the pitting on the bottom side compared to the top side, or vice versa, kind of that's information you really need to know for your RBI, because that stuff can get worse, right? And it tells you that maybe there's something, some problem in the process that you're not seeing. Yeah,
and definitely probably talk to your process engineer about it, because they may be able to inject an inhibitor or something which might help mitigate that, or Ryan's giving me that. I don't know.
Snake oil. We call that snake oil. But
there could be something that they could do, right, to possibly affect that and help mitigate that.
Or maybe they made an operational shift that they didn't realize was impacting you, and they can revert it if they want to. Or it becomes truly a financial choice to say, hey, we're making more money because we're running it harder. That's worth the extra money of repairing in the future, right? That might be an actual choice that you make.
Yeah. I can't believe we're already at like 40 some minutes already, and we still have quite a bit to do.
It doesn't take long. That was a good, sorry to cut you off. That was a good point, how you're kind of going with kind of bringing the whole team together. I think we've mentioned that a few times. A lot of what we do is a team effort, like kind of knowing some of that operational history is pretty valuable when you're going in, and then when you find something like that, having your process engineers available for a solution or that type of thing is really valuable. You want to pull all those resources together, provided they're available.
And it's very difficult to keep your head framed on it when you're in a turnaround. There's equipment, there's damage, let's fix it. And the history is kind of it's easy to lose sight of that, really. So to be able to frame it right and say, hey, you're trying to figure out if something's becoming a chronic problem or not.
Yeah, and not getting caught up in the turnaround aspect and like the mindset of this is the end date and this is when we're closing the manway. Like a good way to think of found repairs is that's almost a blessing, right? Because if you didn't find that, it was going to find you eventually. So that's a good way to look at it, and that's a great opportunity to fix it, because maybe you add a day to your turnaround, but that's a lot less expensive or a lot less of an impact than an unplanned outage or a disastrous forced outage type of situation.
Exactly. And a lot of people say that's a bad thing, especially when they're related to turnaround, because that costs more money. And the way they look at it, they say, hey, your RBI system didn't pick that out. Well, you know what? We function in a whole area of unknowns. Mm-hmm. We can never know what's happening on that until we get into that vessel. And then as soon as we're out of it, we don't know anymore, and the longer you spend after that, the less you know. So it truly is a blessing, because now you can take that and you can build that into your unknowns as well. So now you always know that this corrosion can come back.
Yeah, it's that bit of a needle in the haystack searching around until you get in there, and that's an interesting way to look at it. Like I've been at facilities where if there's a bunch of equipment just scheduled for process cleaning, their mentality is they'll set an armed guard at the door, and any kind of pressure equipment inspector walks by, like they're getting shot at their feet. You're not getting anywhere near this. And then I've been at facility, and these one extreme to another. But then I've been at other facilities where anytime something's being open, even if it was unscheduled, if they just thought, let's open this up and have a look, they want the integrity guy in there to have a look as well too. Yeah. And then everybody in between there, but those are kind of two aspects. It's quite fascinating, the different mindsets.
And I've been the last place I was with said that it was a philosophy. You look at everything, and it transferred into you only look at what you've requested for, which is not to say that if it's getting open, you can't get it, but it means that, and really what it's doing is turnarounds trying to control, because anytime you go in to look at a piece of equipment and you have a risk of finding something, you need contingency planning for that.
Yeah.
Right. So they look at that and say, well, we're not going to touch it because it means contingency has to happen, which is kind of a back to front way of putting it, because if you find it, shouldn't you look at it anyway? But
yeah, and it's fair that your turnaround groups and your planning groups want to know about that, because that impacts them dramatically, right? They got to plan for not only you going in there, the event of a contingency, and all these other scenarios, right? So, I mean, yeah, it's again the team effort thing. You're not just going to sneak in there. It's
yeah. Well, the philosophy is broken, in my personal opinion, because it sort of goes on the theory that we're here to do a bad thing. We're trying to do a bad thing to turn around. That's not the case. We're trying to save lives. So if we find something, we have now saved a life, probably, because either it needs to be replaced or you can run with it, right? And the concept is lost on the fact that we are okay with letting a repair go and not touching it until the next time, if it's safe to do so. Just now we can put actual risk assessment behind it and be sure of it.
Yeah, there doesn't always have to be that battle. It can be a joint effort. Is you just got to get everybody on the same page and the same philosophy, I guess, is the way to look at it.
That's exactly it.
Yeah, sometimes you actually have to sell a repair, right? And it's how you approach it and how you describe what's happening and how you should fix it or what needs to be fixed, right?
It's a pro and a con, because it's a cost and there's a benefit.
Yeah, and we don't always want to fix everything either. That's not always the case. Like, don't get that idea that if we find something, we're going to want to fix it and add weeks and welding and all kinds of scary things. That's not always the case, right? We can assess that. We can, maybe it'll be good to the next run. Maybe we don't have to do anything about it, but at least we know now. Now it's not quite as blindfolded as we were.
Exactly right.
Yeah, and that might, like you said, it might help plan for a more extensive repair or even an upgrade on a future turnaround if you can, maybe lack of a better word, limp through to the next turnaround cycle, right?
Yeah, and now you've got 5 years to sock away money for it versus, doing it in the heat of the moment. So
5 years, what kind of RBI are you doing? It should be 25.
25, yeah.
But it can also mean something better for us as well as an integrity side, because if you have an option to go in just jury rig it together, just Texas weave it, let's put some metal on it, versus
Belzona.
Belzona, exactly. Or you can basically say we're going to limp along with it, but we're going to in parallel build a whole new vessel and land it in an opportunity that happens to be in the future.
Right.
The latter is far more preferable.
Oh yeah,
from an
no
integrity
doubt.
point of view.
Yep.
So why wouldn't you, right?
Mm-hmm. I think the long and short of this is have a plan for your inspection, keep your notes concise, and if you do run into a repair, make sure you know the full extent of it and have a plan available to present to them. Scott and I touched, I think, on a previous episode, I don't remember which one, but like usually on the bigger facilities, there's a team of engineers there that are willing to assist, or it's their job to create the repair plan and repair scope, and kind of the inspector has the input on it and kind of, I won't say goes along with it, but you have your input side of it, but there is a team there ready to kind of assist with repairs so that the main bulk of the turnaround manpower doesn't get caught up in that. So just make sure that you're turning over concise information to the best of your abilities, and make sure you're organized yourself. Even for, I'm going to kind of say this from a contract inspector point of view, for your own internal records, because you hopefully don't need them one day, but you want to make sure that what you're doing, you can stand behind 10 years from now, or whatever cycle is. Like you're responsible for this equipment after it gets closed, right?
The justification is huge.
Yeah.
Huge, because turnaround might not capture that or record that, but you need to know why you chose to do that. Why, or rather, it might not be you choosing it, but rather I should say, but why the decision was made, because with that decision comes a whole bunch of risks that need to be managed.
Yeah, and it's a good way to think of it. And I always say this to a lot of people too. Like the reason we do all this and all this record keeping is so you can explain yourself when you're in front of your honor and you're trying to,
More or less.
backpedal out of a situation. Why not have the evidence right there, and you don't even have to say anything? That's why we all do it. It's very unlikely that those scenarios happen, but that's kind of what's driving that a little bit.
Well, yeah. And, you always forget it. I'll be honest. I'll read my reports from 5 years ago, and I will not remember at all what the hell I was on about. And it's really quite amusing, because if you look at if I look at my younger career, absolutely, I could have written the report after that. But, the way I look at it is, your mind is kind of like an addict. Sorry, not an addict. That's the wrong word. An attic. So if you put the canoe up there, something's got to come out, right? So there's only so much room you can keep in your head at all times.
Oh yeah, I know my hard drive's gotten pretty full over the years, and every time you jam something else in there, something else falls out the other side. So.
Kids try to push the peanut butter sandwich in there.
Yeah,
just grabbing my ears. I think this kind of rolls into like our next kind of point is, along with your reporting, you have found damage and inspection calls to make during all this kind of stuff. What do you kind of think?
We can't get too deep into the repairs, because that's an episode or two of its own. But I think a point I want to make, you talked about how these repairs scopes are generated. Sometimes it's a team. A lot of times it's, the inspector generated themselves. And then sometimes when you're the inspector plucked out by the claw, you just write it up and hand it to somebody. You don't know if they're going to repair it or what they do to it. But something to consider, if you are part of that team and you have this vast wealth of knowledge and everything else, and you come up with a repair plan, it's a good idea to invite those repair contractors and have them part of that discussion too. I'm talking about like the GFs and the foreman, sometimes the welder and the QC people. Maybe they can't always provide technical guidance, the GFs and those people, because that's just not their area, but they can provide the practical guidance. And more often than not, they've done this repair you've ran into several times. So they can kind of point things out when you're trying to go in a direction of something that's not going to work, not from a technical standpoint, but from a practicality standpoint. And they're good resources to have too. And they're not going to challenge you on like welding procedures, things like that, because that's not their area, but they're just good resources to pull into. Like more when you're at that finalized stage of, okay, this is what we want to do. That's when you want to bring them in and have that discussion and, see if they have any objections to that.
Yeah, actually consulting with them is a big thing. This is a one-off situation. Never mind. I don't even want to get into it.
Well,
but to get into like how Scott just said, they may not recommend different welding procedures or something. We were doing a scope one time, and they were doing weld overlay on a vessel, Manway on the bore, and the company I was working for actually they wanted to do stick because it was quicker, whereas the company actually performing the work came in and said, no, we're going to actually do the first layer and the hot pass on it with TIG. And then once that's cleared by NDE, then we'll start using stick just to speed coming in. So Scott's right. Like most likely they've done a job similar to this. Things get really interesting when they said, oh, I've never done that before. Let's try it out.
Yeah. That's when you want to be worried. Maybe see who else you have on site do the repair for you.
But the one thing I've sort of taken away is I can't know everything. Not anyone can know everything. I don't go out there and I don't weld 24/7. These guys do.
Mm-hmm.
Why wouldn't you use that knowledge to your benefit? And really, that's what it is. It's the wisest person knows how little they know, and that's the key. Is that if you don't know enough, bring someone in, or even if you do know enough, bring them in anyway. Maybe there's another tack at it, right?
Yeah, or everybody will agree that that's the best way to do it, and then you can feel pretty confident about it if you weren't already.
Exactly.
Yeah, it definitely feels better when you have 2 or 3 other people saying, yeah, that's about right, with their thumbs in the air, right? Kind of, seems good.
Seems pretty good. She'll go.
Not too many eyebrow lifts in the room. Like, what is this guy talking about?
The other thing I'd like to go on, one thing that I've found is tremendously, or changed my approach to reporting, especially in inspections, is you'll have an inspection plan sitting there that says, here's what you're looking for. You've got all these different places that we think we're going to see corrosion. That's a shot in the dark. Well, maybe not the dark. It's more of a shot in the twilight. Let's put it that way. But, every time we get feedback of what we did find and what we didn't find means that you can make your RBI that much better. And an RBI is a risk-based inspection. You go in, you assess, and then you end up, the end result of an RBI is the next inspection plan for the next turnaround. So it tells you if you got it wrong. And that for me is the most important thing, because we're always trying to figure out where we're going.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to the point where, you know, finding something unknown is a good thing. It usually always is, but in this case, it is a good thing. And then not finding something expected, that can be a bad thing too. So, or a good thing, depending on how you look at it. So that's two pretty good takes on it. You have a bit of a guideline based on some past history, what you think you're going to find. If you don't find it, you know, you can be a little nervous about that, or you can revisit your inspection scopes. And then if there's things you found, especially if they're severe and you weren't expecting, you know, that's something to really consider too.
Yeah, because everyone looks at it and says, you know what, an inspection is an expense. So if you're not finding anything, why are you inspecting it? Right? So really you got to be able to adapt to it and know what the critical place is to go and look for something.
Yeah, it's kind of like the inspection. It's not like a strictly inspection adage, but it's damned if you do, damned if you don't, right?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
If you do find something, sometimes they're like, come on, like now we need to, it's a delay, or there's extra work involved. And if you don't, it's, why did we need to inspect that? Let's keep it closed. Don't worry about it, right? Do UT from the outside. Right?
Which you can do a lot of that.
We did poke fun at that though.
Yeah,
on our
you can
first
do that and
episode.
never open the vessel, right? Isn't that the idea?
Well, so this is the thing, is there's a new field now. Technology's come a long way. A lot of times if you AUT that thing from the external, you'll tell more than you can see with your bare eye. So it's an interesting tool that's starting to become more relevant, is external and lose. But anyway.
It is.
I digress.
No, you're actually right, and I've actually come across a few vessels. Like, I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but we found internal corrosion, and you know, the stuff that you measure from the inside when you can actually see it and get next to it, even with ultrasonics, 0 degree, or even with your pit gauge, kind of subtracting from the previous reading or the known nominal. Sometimes scan from the outside. That tech or the area that they were told to scan might actually be off just by a foot or inches sometimes, and you could miss some critical corrosion. So trying to translate that, just kind of be sure and you're concise in your inspection notes that, you know, it's within a specific maybe clock region or something, some sort of reference point. Measurements from a data point most likely would be the best, right?
Yeah. Well, and you know, as a person who normally puts those kind of plans together, I'll go way over it, quite on purpose, to make sure that you can find good steel, or you can find the end of the corrosion, really. And then extra areas, you'd have to come up with a new idea. But it's really the idea that that external and loose are in parallel to an internal inspection.
Yeah. Repairs? Do we want to get into repairs, or do we want to kind of save that?
I think that's deep enough. I need an hour to talk about vessel repairs, maybe 2, and that's skimming it. You know that this is my area of interest, so don't even think about asking me to talk about this for 5 minutes. That's not going to happen. For
those of you who've never been to Scott's house, his blanket is actually just repair forms and documents. He's got a special print blanket where he loves it and sleeps in it.
You should start some merchandise.
Some merch, hey? Just 80-83 blankets, hey?
Oh, nice. Well, I already have the one.
Blankets,
I already have the one, so we just got to start manufacturing them.
You're going to have to talk to ABSA and see if they've got that copyrighted.
I think those are public documents, though, aren't they? Because they're a government.
Yes, they are.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
If you're listening to this, it's copyrighted already. Don't try it.
Patent pending. I
think about 3 people would buy those ever, and then it would just be horrible.
Yeah.
That would be funny, though.
It's like SkyTrain in Vancouver was trying to come up with like a bunch of shower curtains with their map on it.
Oh, yeah?
Why?
What a weird thing.
Why would you want that?
I don't know.
Holy cow. A schedule would be more freaking appropriate, right?
Exactly. Knowing you're late, you got to fly out of the shower.
So, geez. I think this
have we about done it for tonight?
This feels like we hit crush depth.
No, I think it was pretty good, but I think we're almost limited because we're still kind of recording this before we're in the thick of it in turnaround. And even though we all know how the ebbs and flow of turnarounds go, I think we kind of want to capture this one with a fresh perspective and maybe talk about some unique experiences we had. So, what do you think? Anything else to touch on?
Just about that time, I guess. I'm good. You don't want to get me going, or it'll be another hour here. So.
I think we're almost out of beer too. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a bit of a limiting factor too.
Yeah,
fair enough.
I like it. Dead air. So, do we have a closing slogan for today or for tonight?
Oh, I didn't even think of one as we were going. We'd have to go back to Old Faithful and just cue the music.
Well,
Cue the music.
Information is power to me. I mean, the more you can gather, the better you can assess. The more you can put into your reports and send forward, the better your next plan is going to be. And that really is what we've talked about, I think.
How about shit in, shit out?
That's a better one.
That's
a better one. It's got swears in it.
Hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And remember, if you put shit in, you get shit out.